It's Friday, November 14th, 2025. Fridays are Ask or Tell Me Anything, as well as a Friday 5-pack. It's coming up next on the AM Update. Thank you for making it through another week with me here on the AM Update. I appreciate each and every one of you for listening. I also appreciate all of you every week who leaves 5-star reviews on the podcast platform of your choice, as well as interact with me for our poll of the week and Ask or Tell Me Anything. That latter segment coming up in the next segment. But first, a Friday 5-pack. There's been a lot of negativity this week, and some of it very much deserved on the part of the Trump administration on issues like economic messaging and immigration, H-1B visas. That latter thing is just so head-scratching. President Trump's comments with Laura Ingraham this week talking about, well, we don't have enough talent in the United States. That's why we've got to do the H-1B scam. It's head-scratching for a number of reasons. First and foremost, because it flies in the face of the actual nuts and bolts policy that the Trump administration has engaged in. Fewer H-1B and other things like claims for asylum for various reasons. Fewer, and I'm talking about by many factors, fewer actually accepted claims of asylum this year than any other year in maybe my lifetime. There's also this from the Department of Homeland Security. For the first time in 5 decades, the United States is on track to see negative net migration. The foreign-born population has declined, according to the government's numbers, by 2.2 million people this year, which includes the 1.6 million illegal aliens who have voluntarily self-deported. Well, this is the topic of, again, melding the issues of the economy together with the issue of immigration. Vice President J.D. Vance talked to Fox News yesterday and tied those two issues together.
I know that there are a lot of people out there, Sean, who are saying things are expensive. And we have to remember they're expensive because we inherited this terrible inflation crisis from the Biden administration. But you've already seen signs that things are getting better. The price of eggs has gone way down. The price of energy has gone way down. The price of gasoline has gone way down. And as we know, when the price of energy goes down, that starts to filter out into the entire economy. But that also takes a little bit of time. There's another component of this, Sean, which to me is maybe the most important because I care so much about our young people being able to afford a good life. A lot of young people are saying housing is way too expensive. Why is that? Because we flooded the country with 30 million illegal immigrants who were taking houses that ought by right go to American citizens. And at the same time, we weren't building enough new houses to begin with, even for the population that we had. So what we're doing is trying to make it easier to build houses, trying to make it easier to build factories and things like that so that people have good jobs. We're also getting all of those illegal aliens out of our country, and you're already seeing it start to pay some dividends.
So there's Vice President J.D. Vance. I saw some pushback to this clip that went semi-viral yesterday.
The Trump administration is going to make everything about immigration because they don't have any policies on anything else.
Yeah, numbnuts. I can't remember. I wish I could attribute that. I can't remember who said that, but I saw some pushback to that the other day.
They're going to make everything about immigration.
It's because immigration touches everything, especially when you're talking about tens of millions of illegals in this country. And that's maybe, at least 10 million just during the last 5 years, during the 4 years of Joe Biden. So that is some good messaging there, explaining to the American people why things are the way that they are, why there's so much pressure on housing, why there's so much pressure on the cost of living. It has everything to do with immigration. Now, it's a totally different question whether or not the American people have the patience to see this through. Well, this is from Secretary of State Marco Rubio. A press release yesterday, terrorist designations of Antifa and 3 other violent Antifa groups. Today, building on President Trump's historic commitment to confront Antifa's campaign of political violence, the Department of State is designating German-based Antifa Ost, along with 3 other violent Antifa groups in Italy and Greece, as specially designated global terrorists, and intends to designate all 4 groups as foreign terrorist organizations effective November 20th, The designation of Antifa Ost and other violent Antifa groups supports President Trump's National Security Presidential Memorandum 7, an initiative to disrupt self-described anti-fascism networks, entities, and organizations that use political violence and terroristic acts to undermine democratic institutions, constitutional rights, and fundamental liberties. Groups affiliated with this movement ascribe to revolutionary, anarchist, and Marxist ideologies, including anti-Americanism, anti-capitalism, and so forth. So I wanted to read that entire press release from Marco Rubio to the point that you heard me emphasize there. There is our Secretary of State designating these foreign Antifa groups as foreign terrorist organizations under the pretext that they are driven by Marxist ideologies. That is somewhat subtle, but I think very important. Naming what's actually driving these groups. If you inject that into the bloodstream of our federal government, now I'm sure in some handbook somewhere deep in the deep state, I'm sure somewhere Marxism, communism, I'm sure they are affiliated with negative bad actor. I'm sure that's somewhere. But that has been verboten to name Marxism as a driver of violent ideology. Maybe I'm making too big of a deal out of that, but that stuck out to me from Marco Rubio's announcement yesterday of the designation of 3 foreign Antifa groups as foreign terrorist organizations. Story number 3, this one's pretty quick. According to Attorney General Pam Bondi, the other night, an individual was able, or at least attempted, to confront U.S. Attorney Alina Habba. She's a U.S. Attorney for New Jersey. They were able to break into her office, destroy property, and flee the scene. How does that happen? A U.S. Attorney, somebody was able, some crazed, whacked out, probably leftoid, was able to get to her office, attempted to confront her, was able to break a bunch of stuff in her office, and then fled. Pam Bondi went on to say they're going to find the person and they'll be brought to justice. So that person for now is still at large. All right, let's go to this one. An AI company has been rightfully slammed online over a video promoting the launch of its Avatar app. The name of the company is 2Y. They're a Los Angeles-based tech company. And they launched their social app for avatars via the Apple Store on Tuesday. It uses AI to let users create a holo avatar, quote, who looks and talks like you, even shares the same memories. A video posted by co-founder Callum Worthy promotes the app as a way to memorialize deceased loved ones, and it is creepy as heck.
This baby unicorn was like your mom because she didn't know that she knew how to fly, but she knew how to do all kinds of fabulous things.
So you're listening to an avatar, an AI-generated voice of somebody purporting to be the grandmother, deceased grandmother of this young grandkid.
Who's going to be a great-grandmother?
Oh, Charlie! Oh, congratulations!
She says that he's been kicking a lot, though. Like, a little too much.
That is some demonic stuff there, I'm just going to tell you. If you're using AI for that sort of thing, that's just demonic. Isn't there an explicit ban in the Bible on trying to summon the spirits of the dead? I'm pretty sure there's something in Scripture about that. That is just creepy stuff. Let's have an exorcism, shall we? Tim Tebow appeared on Andrew Schulz's podcast the other day, shared the gospel with Andrew Schulz, which was really good. Also went more in-depth on what drives his faith.
And what we don't realize is that you can accept those things about yourself because Jesus has already died for them. Mm-hmm. This, there's something happening as you're speaking, and you're basically, I don't want to say like deflating your own ego. Maybe you would say that that's a fair thing. But sometimes in order to achieve great things, people believe that you need to almost fill yourself up with these lies to cover the doubt that you might feel.
What lies?
Not lies, but like,
I'm unstoppable.
I'm unstoppable. I can do this. I'm going to go out there. We're going to be victorious, because you have these voices in your head, not you. One has these voices in your head like, what if we don't do it? What if we lose? And it's like you're basically trying to build yourself up because there's a million different voices telling you why you're not good.
Yeah, I think I get that. But that's where I was going back to that song of the voice of truth and remembering, okay, this isn't how I'm defined. I don't have to live in this sin, shame, and guilt, but I get to remember I'm more than a conqueror through him who loved me, and he has placed me here for this moment. He has placed me here, and I can have confidence in where he's placed me, and I don't have to live in that sin, shame, and doubt, although it wants to fight to creep back in. But I get to live in a confidence, because when we go back to hope, I believe that the best biblical definition for hope is to look forward with confidence, expectation, and anticipation, right? We get to do that.
Yes, this is why I'm very happy that you said the word confidence specifically, because I think a lot of times for people maybe who weren't raised in a church or haven't been, aren't like, devout Christians, right? There is this version where maybe some of us are seeing you, what we would say, maybe like harp on the things that are quote unquote wrong about you, or like sins, right? And what we don't realize is that you can accept those things about yourself because Jesus has already died for them. When you don't add that other component, there's a hyperfixation on all the bad things that you do consistently. And I think to somebody on the outside, they might go like, how could you have confidence if you're constantly tearing yourself down with all these bad things? But true belief that somebody else bears the consequence, or has already bear the consequences for those things, man, what a weight off your shoulders, like to be able to confront the things that you struggle with every single day, knowing that you're forgiven for them.
And that you're trying to pursue life where you're
not afraid of them.
Or you're
not lying to yourself constantly.
Yeah, you're not chained. You're not shackled by them. But you're still walking this journey out, trying to grow and improve day by day. And you take steps back, and then you try to take a few more forward, and you grow. Again, knowing that salvation doesn't come from our works. It comes from his finished work. But that in a way to try to grow closer to him, love people, love well, you try to improve every day.
It's former NFL star Tim Tebow on the Andrew Schulz podcast. Love listening to some of these comedians with podcasts, Joe Rogan, Andrew Schulz, asking very earnest and probing questions and sharing questions about faith and what drives these people. And man, I'm sure there's been some people who maybe have questionable credentials, if you want to call them that, when it comes to what they believe in terms of orthodoxy, I'm talking about. But there, at least on a couple occasions now, with Andrew Schulz in particular, he's had Wesley Huff on his program, now Tim Tebow. Two solid dudes. And I hope he continues to ask questions and gets the right answers from those who espouse orthodoxy, like those two individuals. That's going to do it for a Friday 5-Pack. When we come back, it'll be time to Ask or Tell Me Anything. That's coming up next. Ask or Tell Me Anything. Let's start with James. Even if we have a good midterm, what's that actually do for us? When Trump backs Lindsey Graham, homo-rhino Republicans for mayor, governor, senate, etc., that's a big problem. It's a big problem. And, President Trump, the Trump brand, the Trump name is still going to be a force in politics, probably for the rest of our lifetimes, in some way, shape, or form. But I don't have a good answer for you. The hope is maybe that they owe him some allegiance since, he's maybe the reason that they win their elections. Or maybe it's not. Maybe it's just not in the cards for Republicans to win in the midterms. If that's the case, then the presidency is over for Donald Trump at that point. So we shall see, but I don't have a good answer to that question. I just don't. James also says this. Took me a while, but finally came to the realization, wasn't meant to be some sort of prophetic speaker or some pastor or some influencer. I was meant to be the best father I could possibly be and to disciple my house and set forth a path of generational discipleship. Amen, James. It's a good word. Kerry says the provision in the funding bill that allows Republicans who were spied on to sue for $500,000, the only losers in this are the American taxpayer. Money to spy, money to pay those who spied upon us is all taxpayer money. Yes. Now, if it's being characterized, if it's accurate the way it's being characterized, this bill that they passed to reopen the federal government allows those Republican senators who were caught up in the phone spying for Arctic frost, it allows them to sue the government for $500,000. Isn't that a nice gig? Isn't that a nice gig? You know what's not a nice gig? Doing a trumped up trespass at the people's house and going to federal prison for it and not being able to sue for it and getting $500,000. Just with friends like these. We Are Charlie Kirk says, last week you mentioned you were against the use of narcotics for any reason. Would that also include ibogaine? Former Governor Rick Perry is leading the charge with Americans for Ibo. It's plant-based medicine that has documented help with PTSD, anxiety, depression, and addiction. Well, we were talking in the context of recreational use of narcotics. So recreational use of narcotics, you know, more and more I'm coming down on the side of very much less libertarian than I think a lot of people have been. And that was in the context of polling as well. I have heard of ibogaine. I heard about it the first time back earlier this year. It was some prominent Republican senator or congressman on a random Tuesday afternoon went on the television for an interview to talk about ibogaine, which is really weird. Maybe it was Rick Perry. I can't remember. If I'm not mistaken, you said plant-based. I do believe it is a psychedelic. It is a psychedelic. So, you know, I have heard that it helps with those conditions as well. And again, my pushback to narcotic use was in the context of recreational use. And as I understand it, and I don't think they really shy away from this, at least not in the interview that I heard, it is hallucinogenic at higher dosage levels. You know, if it's, I guess if it's taken in a controlled environment and typical therapies, you know, like actual therapy for treating PTSD or anxiety. And I think therapy is only valuable if it's Christian counseling. That's something that I plant my flag in. It's therapy. Just going to therapy, I don't think has much value unless it's a Christian therapist that's actually using biblical principles. But, you know, if it's taken along with that and it actually helps people and it's not this weird hallucinogen, then yeah, sure. I guess I don't have a problem with that. But it kind of stuck out to me because the account that I heard is that, well, it comes from this plant and it's a hallucinogen and people have taken it and have basically attributed it to being a miraculous drug. I'm like, is that really treating the root cause of things like PTSD? Let's go to this. Maybe end it here. Light the Dark, California. Should we pray for the Dems? I honestly believe that they're not all this wicked, but I believe they are beholden to the French Revolutionary-style guillotine-wielding extremists that we have seen. If you disagree with them, they will put your head or put you in the streets and do the deed. Yeah, you should pray for Democrats. You should pray for those who persecute you. You can pray imprecatory prayers against their wicked plans. I don't think that's unbiblical at all. But for the individuals themselves, yeah, I think that's pretty cut and dried. You do need to pray for them. And I don't do a great job at that. I don't do a great job in thinking through and thinking about them in those terms. Some people are easier to think about in terms of their humanity and made in the Imago Dei. You know, hearing John Fetterman talk about just the awful, awful things that left-wingers say to him on Blue Sky, wishing that the stroke would have won, creating animated GIFs, putting a stroke back into his brain, talking about how they wish depression would have won. That's just wicked. And I think part of this is that even though our lines politically and worldview-wise have been drawn so starkly and so clearly now, and it's maybe more of a function of the fact that the left has gone so far left and so far wicked and evil that the lines just kind of naturally appear. I do think that we are more prone to seeing even left-wingers like John Fetterman, who vote against us, who vote against our worldview, 90% of the time. We do see the humanity where that's uncouth at best. Even if you're saying this about a guy who votes with you, the Democrats, 90% of the time, or whatever it is, 80% of the time. And you wish that depression would have won. You wish that his children would find him dead. That's what they say about their own politicians over there. And so I do think it's a good word to remind us that even though, yes, these people behave as animals, they behave in a very feral way. They say some of the most disgusting and uncivilized things and believe those things, I guess. They are still made in the image of God. And they still have souls, and they need prayer. They need to be defeated, and yeah, that too, but they do need prayer at the end of the day. Well, that's brought us to the end of the week of the AM Update. I appreciate yet again, want to say this as many times as possible, each and every one of you for listening. I do appreciate it. Hope you have a wonderful weekend. Back at it again on Monday.